You awaken to the sound of water lapping against wood. Not a violent crash of waves, but a gentle rhythmic touch, like fingers tapping on an old table. The air around you is neither warm nor cold, but exists in that perfect stillness where temperature ceases to matter. Your eyes open to a perpetual twilight, a sky that isn't quite a sky, bathed in a luminescence that casts no shadows. The boat beneath you creaks, ancient wood that has ferried countless others before you. Your fingers trace the grain, feeling each ridge and valley, a topography of time itself. The wood is smooth in some places, worn down by the touch of those who came before. In others it retains its roughness, small splinters, threatening to embed themselves in your skin, but never quite doing so. You realize you don't remember how you arrived here. The before is a fog thinner, in some places, denser, in others. Memories float like leaves on the surface of a pond, visible, but when you reach for them, they disperse into ripples. This doesn't frighten you as it perhaps should. Instead, there's a curious acceptance, as if your body understands something your mind has not yet grasped. Ahead, through the gentle mist that hovers above the water, you can make out the vague outline of a shoreline. It doesn't rush to meet you. The boat moves with deliberate slowness. Time feels different here. Each moment stretches not unpleasantly, but with a certain weight to it. Like honey dripping from a spoon, each second takes its time to fully form before yielding to the next. The figure steering the boat stands behind you. You haven't turned to look, but you're aware of his presence. There's no need for introduction or explanation. Some knowledge simply exists within you now, as natural as breathing. He is Karen the ferryman. He hasn't spoken, and you sense he never will. The silence between you is not awkward, but appropriate, like the pause between movements in a symphony. The water below is dark, but not threatening. Looking down, you can see your reflection, though it seems slightly different, softer around the edges, as if you're viewing yourself through gauze. The water itself doesn't smell of salt or algae or life. It simply is. A barrier, a boundary, a passage from one state to another. Your clothes feel both familiar and strange against your skin. They're what you've always worn, yet they hang on you differently now, as if they've been laundered in water that altered their very fabric. The colors seem muted, not in a way that suggests fading, but rather as if vibrancy itself has been gently subdued. As the boat continues its unhurried journey, you notice small objects floating in the water. A child's toy, a folded letter, its ink running into illegibility, a single shoe. You understand without being told that these are remnants, things left behind, forgotten or released. They don't evoke sadness in you, merely a quiet recognition. The mist parts momentarily, allowing you to see further ahead. The shoreline is taking shape now, a gentle slope of gray sand, leading to fields that stretch beyond what your eye can perceive. There are figures moving there, unhurried like pedestrians, in a town square with no appointments to keep. You feel a curious lightness, not the absence of weight, but rather the absence of urgency, the constant pressure that has followed you throughout your life. The need to hurry, to accomplish, to move forward, has dissipated. here in this boat, on this quiet river crossing to that distant shore. You simply are, and for now that is enough. The gentle rocking of the boat lulls you into a state between alertness and dreaming. Thoughts come and go without demanding attention. Memories surface and submerge like gentle sea creatures breaking the water's plane before returning to the depths. You don't chase them. There will be time enough for remembering. There will be time enough for everything now. The boat gently nudges against the shore, a soft collision that barely disturbs the silence. You step onto the gray sand, which yields beneath your feet without a sound. It's neither wet nor dry, neither warm nor cold, just another in-between state. In this place of eternal twilight, you notice that you've brought something with you. A small bag hangs from your shoulder, its weight familiar against your side. You didn't pack it. You don't remember having it on the boat. Yet its presence feels right, as natural as the arm that hangs at your side. Opening it reveals objects from your life, small, seemingly insignificant things that somehow contain the essence of who you were, who you are. A smooth stone from a beach vacation, its surface worn by years of absent-minded touching. A ticket stub from a concert where the music made you feel both infinitely small and perfectly complete. A pencil worn down to half its original length that wrote words of both heartbreak and joy. A photograph, its edges softened by handling, showing faces that bring a warmth to your chest. These are not your greatest achievements or most valuable possessions. They are the small anchors of your existence, touchstones that when held connect you to the moments that shaped you. The stone recalls not just the vacation, but the feeling of sun on your skin, the sound of your own laughter mixing with the crash of waves, the taste of salt on your lips. The ticket stub brings not just the memory of music, but the press of bodies around you, all experiencing the same sonic journey, the momentary dissolution of the barriers that usually separate us from one another. As you walk further from the shore, the bag grows neither heavier nor lighter. It simply accompanies you, a collection of your personal markers in this impersonal landscape. You understand without being told that everyone here carries something similar, their own assemblage of memories made tangible. Some of the figures you pass clutch their mementos openly. A woman cradles a child's blanket. A man turns a wedding ring around and around on his finger. Others have hidden their treasures away, as you have carrying them close but out of sight. These objects are not currency here, not something to be traded or displayed for status. They are simply the things that remind you of your own story when the details begin to blur. The path leads gently upward, away from the water. The sand gradually gives way to a soft ashen soil where pale flowers grow. Asphodels, you somehow know. Their white blooms nod in a breeze you can barely feel, acknowledging your passage without judgment. You stop to rest on a stone that seems placed deliberately beside the path. Reaching into your bag, you withdraw the photograph and study it. The faces are still clear, but some of the details around them have begun to soften, like a drawing left in the rain. You can't recall the name of the place it was taken, though you remember the quality of light that day, how it seemed to gild everything it touched. This is what you've discovered about memory here. It preserves feelings more faithfully than facts. The emotion of a moment remains vibrant, while the particulars fade. You remember loving but forget the exact shade of a loved one's eyes. You remember belonging but forget the address of the place you called home. Returning the photograph to your bag, your fingers brush against something unexpected, a small notebook you don't recognize. Opening it reveals blank pages, save for the first, which bears a single line in handwriting, not your own. What you carry carries you. You close the notebook, returning it to your bag. Looking up, you notice other travelers on the path ahead and behind. Each moves at their own pace, some pausing often to examine their treasures, others walking steadily forward, their gaze fixed on the distant horizon. There is no right way to make this journey, you realize. No correct speed or method. Each soul follows the rhythm set by what they carry. Rising from the stone, you continue along the path. The bag at your side holds the weight of your life. Not a burden, but a ballast, keeping you connected to yourself as you navigate this place of in-betweens. What you carry defines you even here, perhaps especially here, where all other definitions have been stripped away. The path curves ahead, leading toward a grove of trees, whose silver leaves whisper secrets you can almost understand. As you walk, you find yourself cataloging the contents of your bag, in your mind, a quiet recitation of the fragments that make up a life. This is what remains after everything else falls away. These small, precious things that you chose consciously or not to carry with you beyond the final threshold. The grove of silver-leaved trees welcomes you with a hushed rustling. Light filters through the canopy, but it's unlike any light you've known before. It doesn't create shadows beneath the trees, nor does it warm your skin. Instead, it seems to exist as pure illumination, revealing without transforming, showing without emphasizing. You've been walking for what might be hours or might be days. Time here refuses to be measured in conventional ways. Instead, it flows according to its own rhythm, expanding around moments of recognition and contracting through the spaces between. The light behaves similarly, operating by laws that feel both alien and somehow more honest than those you've known. In the world you left behind, light was a performer, creating drama with its entrances and exits, painting the world gold at dawn and crimson at dusk, casting shadows that stretched and shortened as the day progressed. Here, light is a constant presence, neither announcing itself nor retreating. It simply exists, illuminating everything equally, without preference or prejudice. As you move deeper into the grove, you notice how this steady, shadowless light reveals things differently. The bark of the trees shows patterns you might never have noticed in the variable light of the living world. Intricate whorls that remind you of fingerprints, each one unique and telling its own story. The flowers growing between the roots are neither bright nor pale, but exist in a state between their colors true, without being insistent. You pause beside a small pool of perfectly still water. Looking down, you expect to see your reflection, but what greets you is both more and less than that. The face, looking back, is recognizably yours, but subtly altered. The lines of worry that had become so familiar have softened. The eyes that return your gaze hold a depth of understanding that wasn't there before. This place is changing you, or perhaps revealing the person you always were beneath the layers of pretense and protection you accumulated through life. The light that illuminates your reflection doesn't come from above or from any discernible source. It seems to emanate from the air itself, from the space between objects, rather than from any central point. This diffuse, directionless light creates a world without harsh contrasts, a place where nothing can hide in darkness, but nothing is blinded by brightness either. Moving on, you enter a clearing where several paths converge. Other travelers pause, here some sitting on smooth stones, arranged in a rough circle, others standing in quiet contemplation. Their forms seem more or less substantial, depending on how you focus your eyes. Those you look at directly appear solid and real, while those at the periphery of your vision seem translucent, as if they exist in a slightly different layer of reality. The light treats them all the same, illuminating each with equal clarity. You realize that this is perhaps the most profound difference in this place, the absence of the uneven distribution of light that created hierarchies in the world above. Here no one stands in another's shadow. No one captures more than their share of illumination. The light falls on the forgotten accountant with the same generosity it bestows upon the remembered king. You take a seat on one of the empty stones, feeling the cool smoothness against your palms as you lean back and gaze upward. The canopy above doesn't block the light, but seems to filter it, transforming it from raw illumination into something more refined, more thoughtful. Through the gaps between leaves, you can see the unchanging sky, neither day nor night, but a perpetual state of in-between that should feel unsettling, but somehow doesn't. A figure approaches, taking the stone beside yours. An elderly woman, her face mapped with the lines of a long life. In the even light, you can see both the young woman she was and the wisdom she accumulated over decades, written simultaneously on her features. She doesn't speak, but nods in acknowledgement of your presence. The light between you seems to thicken slightly, creating not a barrier, but a connection, a shared understanding that requires no words. As you sit together in companionable silence, you begin to understand another quality of this place. In the absence of time's passage, marked by the sun's journey across the sky, each moment takes on a complete quality. There is no anticipation of the next transition, no nostalgia for the light that has passed. Each instant exists fully asking to be experienced entirely before yielding to the next. The woman rises, eventually continuing on her path. You remain a while longer, watching how the unchanging light reveals the clearing and its visitors, without the dramatic entrances and exits of sunlight, without the urgency created by impending darkness. Interactions unfold at their natural pace. Connections form and dissolve according to their own internal logic rather than external pressures. When you finally stand to continue your journey, you realize that the light has changed you, not physically, as sunlight once tanned your skin, or as darkness once made your pupils dilate. Rather, it has altered your perception. You've begun to see not just with your eyes, but with a deeper understanding, one that recognizes the equality of all things under this impartial illumination, one that values clarity over drama, revelation over concealment. The path leads onward, through the remainder of the grove and toward a vast plain visible in the distance. As you walk, you find yourself no longer searching for shadows in which to rest or bright spots to guide your way. Instead, you move through the even light with a new appreciation for its subtle honesty, for the way it reveals the world, not as you wish to see it, but as it truly is. The grove of silver trees gradually thins as you follow the path, giving way to the vast plain you glimpsed earlier. Here in this open expanse, you become aware of the sounds of the underworld, or rather, the quality of sound that defines this place. It's not the absence of noise, but a different relationship with acoustics altogether. In the world above, sound was often an assault. Cars, honking phones, ringing televisions, blaring people, talking over one another in a constant competition to be heard. Even in moments of intended quiet, there was the hum of electronics, the distant roar of airplanes, the subtle but ever-present soundtrack of modern existence. Here, sound exists in a state of perfect clarity. Each noise is distinct, contained within itself, never bleeding into or overshadowed by another. When a pebble dislodges beneath your foot and tumbles down the path, you can follow its journey completely. The initial scrape against larger stones, the series of small bounces, the final settling into dust. The sound doesn't echo or reverberate. It simply exists, perfect and complete, before fading into the ambient silence. This silence between sounds isn't empty or oppressive. It's a living quiet, receptive and attentive, like the pause in conversation when someone is truly listening. It makes you conscious of your own noises, the rustle of your clothing as you walk, the rhythm of your breathing, the subtle shifting of the items in your bag. You find yourself moving more deliberately, not to avoid making sound, but to fully appreciate each acoustic moment you create. As you cross the plain, you encounter other souls. Their footsteps reach your ears with remarkable precision. You can distinguish between the light tread of a child's spirit and the measured pace of an elder without needing to look up. Conversations carry to you not as indistinct murmurs, but as clear exchanges undiminished by distance, though they become quieter, as if out of respect for your attention rather than due to physical laws. It was the smell of those oranges. One voice says the words distinct, though the speaker is merely a distant figure on the horizon. Whenever I peeled one, I remembered that summer by the sea. The sweater was blue, but not ordinary blue. Comes another voice from a different direction. It was the blue of that lake at dusk, when the water seemed to hold the last light. You realize these aren't conversations but recitations, souls telling the stories of their treasured objects, their carried memories, speaking them aloud to keep them intact. The acoustics of this place serve this purpose perfectly, allowing each syllable to exist fully before the next arrives, preserving the integrity of remembrance. After walking for a time, you come upon a circular depression in the plain, a natural amphitheater of sorts. Several dozen souls sit on the gently sloping sides, all facing inward where a single figure stands. As you find a place to sit, the figure begins to speak, and you understand that you've stumbled upon one of the storytellers of the underworld. You remember the sound of your grandmother's wooden spoon against the side of the pot. The storyteller says their voice neither loud nor insistent, yet perfectly audible. How it changed pitch as the stew thickened. How she hummed while she cooked always the same 3 or 4 songs, never the whole melody, just fragments that floated around the kitchen like steam. The storyteller isn't addressing anyone in particular, but speaking universal truths that resonate differently with each listener. You find yourself recalling the specific acoustics of your own childhood kitchen, not just the sounds themselves, but how they made you feel, the way certain noises signaled comfort, others excitement, others the familiar rhythm of daily life. You remember the creak of that one floorboard near the bathroom. The storyteller continues, how you learned to step over it when returning. Late though, on some nights, half asleep you'd forget and wince at the betraying groan of wood, the house speaking your name into the darkness. Around you, heads nod in recognition. Each soul is hearing their own version of these universal experiences, the specific acoustics of their particular existence. The storyteller is giving voice to the shared human experience of living in a world of sound, of being shaped by the auditory landscape we often took for granted. After a time, the storyteller falls silent. No one applauds. That would disrupt the perfect acoustic balance of the moment. Instead, there's a collective exhalation, a shared acknowledgement of what has been given and received. Slowly, the gathered souls begin to disperse, carrying with them the freshly awakened memories of their own soundscapes. You remain seated for a while, eyes closed, allowing yourself to remember the specific timbre of loved ones' voices, the reassuring sound of rain on a familiar roof, the crunch of autumn leaves underfoot, the distant train whistle that once made you melancholy for places you'd never been. These acoustic memories feel precious, now worth preserving, with the same care you give to the physical objects in your bag. When you finally rise and continue your journey across the plain, you find yourself listening differently, not just to the external sounds of this strange in-between place, but to the internal echoes of your life's acoustics. Each remembered sound brings with it a context and emotion, a moment in time when your senses captured something worth keeping. A distant bell tones its single note, hanging in the air longer than should be possible, neither fading nor intensifying, but simply persisting. You understand somehow that it's a marker, a gentle division of whatever passes for time here. The sound doesn't demand a response, merely offers orientation in this timeless landscape. As you walk toward the distant mountains that edge the plain, the quality of sound shifts subtly. The silence between noises takes on a different texture, becoming more expectant, as if the acoustic space itself is preparing for something new. Your footsteps seem to carry further, now each one creating a discrete, perfect note that hangs in the air momentarily before yielding to the next. In this place, where sound exists in its purest form, unburdened by distortion or competition, you begin to understand hearing as a form of touch, a way that the world reaches out to make contact with you, to confirm both its existence and yours. Each sound is a brief, perfect connection between the source and your consciousness, a momentary bridge across the space between being and perceiving. The path begins to slope upward, leading toward a pass between two gentle peaks. The acoustics change again as the landscape narrows, sounds becoming slightly more concentrated without ever growing harsh or overwhelming. It's as if the underworld itself is composed with the acoustic intention, each region offering its own specific relationship with sound. As you approach the pass, you hear something new, a sound like water, but not quite. More melodic, more intentional, music perhaps, or something adjacent to it. The acoustics of the path ahead remain a mystery, another aspect of this journey waiting to be experienced and understood. The mountain pass opens onto a vista that stops you mid-stride. Before you stretches a landscape unlike any you've seen in this realm, or perhaps unlike any you've seen at all. It appears at first glance to be a vast city with structures of varying heights and designs spreading to the horizon. But as you look more closely, you realize this is no ordinary urban environment. Each building, each street, each garden and plaza seems to shimmer slightly, its edges not quite solid. Some structures appear more substantial than others, their forms, clearer their colors, more vivid. Others are little more than suggestions, translucent outlines that you can see through to the buildings behind them. And strangest of all, the entire cityscape seems to be in a constant state of subtle flux. Buildings slowly shifting position, streets gently redirecting the whole panorama, flowing like a liquid that has nearly but not quite reached solidity. A figure stands near the path, watching your reaction with a knowing expression. Unlike many of the souls you've encountered, this one seems fully present, their form as substantial as your own. They wear simple robes of a muted blue-gray, and their eyes hold the calm wisdom of someone who has been in this place for a very long time. The fields of remembrance, they say, gesturing toward the shifting cityscape. Their voice has the same perfect clarity as all sounds in this realm, neither loud nor soft, but precisely audible. What you're seeing are memories given form. Each structure, each space, is someone's recollection, places that mattered enough to follow them into the afterlife. You look again at the vast landscape of architectural memories. Now that it's been explained, you can see the personal nature of each structure. None bear the impersonal stamp of professional design. Instead, they carry the idiosyncrasies of individual remembrance. A house with a door that seems too large, because that's how it felt to the child who once passed through it. A library whose interior is visible from outside books, arranged not by any system, but by the emotional connections of the one who read them. The more clearly remembered, the more substantial the form. Your guide continues. Those that are visited, often by their creators, remain solid. Those that are beginning to fade from memory grow transparent. Eventually, they dissolve completely, making room for new remembrances. You step onto the path that leads down into the valley of memories, your guide falling in to step beside you. As you descend, you begin to notice souls moving through the cityscape, some alone, others in small groups. Many seem to be visiting specific buildings, entering them with purpose, or simply standing outside, gazing at them with expressions of recognition and longing. They're revisiting their own memories, your guide explains, following your gaze, or sometimes the memories of others, if they've been invited. It's a way of keeping the past alive, or sometimes of finally letting it go. The path winds between structures of varying substantiality. You pass a small cottage with a garden of impossibly vibrant flowers, so clearly remembered that you can see every detail: the slight chip in the blue painted door, the uneven cobblestones of the path leading to it, the way the right side shutter hangs at a slightly different angle than its mate. A woman sits on a bench in the garden, her eyes closed, her expression one of perfect contentment as she inhabits her memory fully. Further along, you pass the ghost of what might have been a school, its outlines fading, its details blurring. No, one stands nearby. Perhaps the soul who remembered it has moved on, or perhaps they've simply visited their other stronger memories, allowing this one to gradually dissolve back into the substance of potential from which all forms here emerge. Will I find my own memories here? You ask suddenly, curious about what structures might represent your past. Your guide smiles. They're forming even now. As you travel through the underworld, your consciousness is solidifying certain memories, giving them form in this landscape. Later, if you wish, you can return to visit them. The idea that your memories are taking physical form somewhere in this vast field is both comforting and slightly unsettling. Which moments from your life will prove substantial enough to create buildings? Which places left enough of an impression on your soul to manifest here? As if reading your thoughts, your guide gestures toward a side path. Would you like to see one of yours? It's quite new, of course, but already taking shape. Curious, you follow the smaller path as it winds between memory structures of varying clarity. After a short walk, your guide stops and points to a small structure just off the path. It takes you a moment to recognize it, not because it's insubstantial, but because you're seeing it from an unfamiliar angle. It's the boat that carried you across the river when you first arrived in this realm. Not a building at all, but a vessel perfectly recreated down to the worn smoothness of the wood, where countless hands have gripped its sides. The memory is so fresh, so clearly imprinted on your consciousness that the boat appears almost as solid as the real thing. Your journey has just begun, your guide says, and already you're creating the landscape of your afterlife. Each significant experience, each moment of true attention adds to your field of remembrance. You approach the boat memory cautiously, half expecting it to rock beneath your feet as you step into it. Instead, there's only the solid ground beneath the illusion of the vessel. Yet when you trail your fingers along the gunwale, you feel the texture of the wood just as you remember it. Smooth in some places, rough in others. It's real, only to you, your guide explains. Another soul would pass through it as if it weren't there, unless you specifically invited them to share in your memory. Looking up from the boat, you notice something in the distance, a structure that seems to be forming even as you watch. It's still mostly transparent, its details unclear, but you recognize the general shape of the amphitheater where you sat listening to the storyteller on the plain. Yes, your guide confirms, following your gaze. That memory is still forming. The more you reflect on it, the more substantial it will become. You step out of the boat, memory feeling a newfound appreciation for the way this realm works. Memory isn't just something you carry within you, Here, it's a landscape you can walk through, structures. You can revisit spaces that exist in the liminal territory between thought and physical reality. As you and your guide continue along the main path, you pass countless memory structures, some grand, some humble, all deeply personal to those who created them. A lighthouse on a tiny island, its beam sweeping regularly across the surrounding landscape. A city apartment with a window box full of herbs, a massive oak tree with a swing hanging from one sturdy branch. Each represents a place where someone's soul once felt at home, or afraid, or fully alive. Locations where significant moments accumulated to create a site worth remembering into eternity. Do we only remember places? You ask, noticing the predominance of structures and landscapes. Your guide shakes their head. The fields contain whatever forms memory takes for each soul. For many places provide the setting for their most significant experiences. For others, they gesture toward an open area where what appears to be a family dinner is taking place. The table and the people around it all formed from the same slightly shimmering substance as the buildings. The scene repeats itself in a continuous loop. Past, dishes, smiles, exchanged conversations you can't quite hear, but can see in the movements of lips and the expressions that follow. Some remember moments rather than locations. Your guide continues. Interactions, conversations, gatherings. These too find form here as the path begins to climb again, leading toward the far side of the valley. You look back over the vast field of externalized memory. From this vantage point, you can see how the structures relate to one another. Clusters of similar architectural styles representing cultures and eras, smaller groupings that might indicate shared experiences or communities. The entire field forms a map not of physical geography, but of collective remembrance, a landscape built from the moments that mattered enough to follow souls beyond life itself. Your guide points to the path ahead, which leads out of the valley and toward a forest visible in the distance. Will you continue your journey, or would you like to spend more time exploring the fields? You consider the question, looking once more at the landscape of memories stretching in all directions. There will be time to return here later. You think to see what structures your own consciousness has created from the raw material of experience. For now, the path ahead calls to you, promising new understanding of this realm, where memory and reality intertwine in ways both strange and beautiful. With a nod to your guide, you turn toward the waiting forest, carrying with you a new awareness of how remembrance shapes existence in this place, and perhaps in some way, in the world you left behind. As well, the forest at the edge of the memory fields is unlike any woodland you've known. The trees grow not from soil, but from objects, small personal items, half buried in the misty ground. Each tree springs from something once cherished, a tarnished locket, a child's worn shoe, a fountain pen still stained with ink, a pair of wire-rimmed spectacles with one cracked lens. As you enter the woods, you realize you're walking through a forest grown from abandoned possessions, each item serving as a seed from which these strange, gray-barked trees have sprouted. Your guide has remained behind at the edge of the memory fields, leaving you to continue this portion of your journey alone. The path narrows as it winds between the object-rooted trees, sometimes forcing you to turn sideways to squeeze between trunks that lean toward one another as if sharing secrets in a language made of creaking wood and rustling leaves. The canopy above filters the omnipresent light, creating not shadows, but variations in illumination, places where the glow seems more concentrated, others where it diffuses into a gentle haze. Through gaps in the leaves, you occasionally glimpse what might be birds, though their movements seem too deliberate, too patterned to be truly avian. You realize after watching for a time that they're not birds at all, but small objects in flight, a silver thimble swooping like a swallow, a pocket watch swinging from branch to branch, like a pendulous gibbon, a child's paper boat sailing through the air as if on invisible currents. The forest floor is carpeted with smaller items, buttons, coins, keys, marbles, all half embedded in the spongy ground. Each step requires careful placement to avoid treading on these miniature monuments to forgotten ownership. You find yourself moving more slowly, with greater attention to where you place your feet, aware that each object, no matter how seemingly insignificant, once mattered to someone enough to follow them into the afterlife. After walking for what might be minutes or hours, time continues to resist measurement in this realm. You come upon a clearing dominated by a massive oak tree. Unlike the others, this tree doesn't grow from a single object, but from hundreds, perhaps thousands, all clustered around its enormous trunk. Wedding rings, diaries, photographs, baby shoes, medals, ticket stubs, locks of hair tied with faded ribbon, a lifetime of meaningful possessions serving as the foundation for this arboreal giant. Seated on a root that arches above the ground, before plunging back into the soil, is a figure unlike others you've encountered. While most souls here maintain a human appearance, this being seems composed of objects, a face made of watch gears and camera parts limbs, constructed from umbrella ribs and pencils, a torso assembled from book covers and picture frames. As you approach these disparate items, shift slightly, reconfiguring themselves to form an expression of greeting. The collector. The figure introduces itself. Its voice, a symphony of small sounds. The click of latches, the rustle of pages, the gentle chime of glass touching glass. I tend the forest of abandoned treasures. You gesture at the enormous tree behind them. Does each soul contribute to this forest? The collector's face rearranges itself into what might be a smile. Only those possessions truly let go. It explains. Many souls carry their most precious objects with them through eternity. It gestures at your bag, as you do. But eventually, most find that certain things, even treasured things, become too heavy to carry forever. When they're ready to release these burdens, they come here. You think of the objects in your own bag, each one a tangible connection to your past. The idea of abandoning them feels impossible now, yet you can understand how an eternity of remembrance might eventually become its own kind of weight. May I? The collector extends a hand made of fountain pens and crochet hooks, gesturing toward your bag. Hesitantly, you open it, allowing the strange being to peer inside. The collector doesn't touch your possessions, but studies them with eyes made of camera lenses, the apertures widening and narrowing as they focus on each item. Yes, it says finally, you've chosen well, things that connect rather than anchor. But even so, there may come a time. The thought remains unfinished as the collector's attention shifts to something over your shoulder. Turning, you see a soul entering the clearing, an elderly man carrying a bulging suitcase that seems far too heavy for his frame. He struggles with each step, yet refuses to set the burden down until he reaches the massive oak. The collector rises its object body, reconfiguring into a welcoming stance. You've carried them long enough, it says to the newcomer. The man nods, his expression a complex mixture of reluctance and relief. With visible effort, he places the suitcase on the ground and opens it, revealing a jumble of objects, framed certificates, trophies, newspaper clippings, yellowed with age business cards, expensive watches, the keys to what might have been luxury, cars or grand houses. My achievements, the man explains, his voice wavering. I thought I needed them to remember who I was. The collector nods, an understanding smile forming from the shifting objects of its face. And now I understand. They were never what mattered. The man removes a single photograph from the suitcase, a family portrait, and places it in a pocket over his heart. This is enough to carry. As the man steps back, the objects in the open suitcase begin to stir, rising into the air like autumn leaves caught in a gentle whirlwind. They dance around the great oak before settling among its roots, some immediately beginning to sink into the soil, others nestling into crevices in the bark. The empty suitcase itself shivers, then collapses into its component parts, hinges, leather, lining, each piece finding its own place in the great collage of abandoned possessions. The man stands straighter now, as if physically unburdened. With a nod to the collector and a curious glance at you, he turns and follows a different path out of the clearing, his steps lighter, his shoulders relaxed, in a way they weren't before. It happens this way, the collector says, returning its attention to you, not all at once for most. A piece here, a trinket there. The forest grows slowly, fed by gradual relinquishment. You look around at the countless objects embedded in the ground, sprouting into trees, floating through the air, and wonder about the stories behind each one. How many represented genuine burdens, weighing down souls who couldn't release their grip on material validation? How many were beloved keepsakes, released not because they were too heavy, but because their owners had finally internalized the memories they represented? The collector seems to read your thoughts. Each object carries its own story, it says. Each release happens for its own reasons. I don't judge, I only receive. As if to demonstrate, it extends an arm toward a small object that has appeared on the path. A child's toy soldier, painted in fading red and blue. The toy rises into the air and floats toward the collector, who examines it briefly before sending it to join the constellation of objects orbiting the great oak. Somewhere a soul has just let go of a childhood memory, the collector explains, perhaps because it's fully integrated now, no longer needing a physical anchor, perhaps because it's finally faded beyond recognition, or perhaps because the weight of nostalgia became too much to bear. You think about the objects in your own bag, Will there come a time when you no longer need these physical reminders, when the stone from the beach becomes unnecessary because the feeling of that day has been fully absorbed into your being, when the concert ticket loses its power because the music has become part of your internal symphony? Don't rush, the collector advises again, seeming to sense your thoughts. Carrying is not always a burden. Sometimes it's a privilege, a responsibility, a choice made in love. Release comes when it's right, not before. With a gesture that might be a blessing, the collector indicates a path continuing through the forest. Unlike the way you entered, this path is wider, less winding, as if designed for those walking with a new lightness in their step. As you prepare to continue your journey, the collector speaks once more. When, if, you return to release something, I'll be here. The forest is always open to those ready to let go. You nod in acknowledgement, then set off along the indicated path. As you walk, you are conscious of the weight of your bag against your hip. Not a burden, but a presence, a companionship of chosen memories. Around you, the forest continues its quiet existence, each object finding its place in this strange ecosystem of abandoned treasures, each tree growing from the rich soil of relinquishment. The path gradually widens, the trees thin, and ahead you can see the forest giving way to another landscape entirely. Before leaving the shelter of the object, trees, you pause, reaching into your bag to touch each of your treasures, not to say goodbye, but to acknowledge their continued significance. They remain yours to carry, at least for now, these physical anchors in a realm where physicality itself seems increasingly optional. With a last look at the forest of abandoned treasures, you step onto the open path beyond, carrying your chosen weights into whatever awaits you next in this journey through the territories of after. The path from the forest of abandoned treasures leads you to the edge of what appears to be a vast amphitheater carved into a sloping hillside. Unlike the intimate gathering space where you heard the storyteller, this structure is enormous, capable of seating thousands. Yet it maintains the perfect acoustics you've come to expect in this realm. As you approach, you can hear voices rising from within, not in cacophony, but in a harmonious interweaving of tones and cadences, each one distinct, yet contributing to a whole that feels almost musical in its complexity. Taking a seat on one of the stone benches near the top of the amphitheater, you look down at the spectacle below. Hundreds of souls occupy the tiered seating, but there is no central performer or speaker. Instead, conversations are happening everywhere. Pairs and small groups engaged in exchanges that somehow manage not to interfere with one another, despite their proximity. The acoustics of the space allow each conversation its own integrity while simultaneously blending them into a collective murmur that rises and falls like ocean waves. A woman a few rows down turns and notices you. First time at the symposium, she asks, her voice reaching you with perfect clarity despite the distance and the ambient sound. When you nod, she pats the space beside her. Come closer. It's easier to understand if you're fully within the acoustic field. You make your way down to join her, navigating between other seated souls who acknowledge you with nods or small smiles before returning to their own exchanges. As you settle beside the woman, the quality of sound around you shifts subtly. Individual conversations become more distinct, as if each has its own channel that you can tune into by directing your attention toward it. The Symposium of Unfinished Conversations, your new companion explains, where we continue the dialogues that were interrupted by life or death. Looking around more carefully now, you notice the intensity with which the participants are engaged. These aren't casual exchanges, but deeply meaningful discussions, the kind that alter perspectives, heal wounds, or illuminate truths. Some speak with furrowed brows and emphatic gestures. Others listen with expressions of dawning comprehension. Some conversations appear to be reconciliations with tears and clasped hands. Others seem more like intellectual explorations with participants sketching diagrams in the air that linger momentarily before dissipating. Everyone here has something left unsaid, the woman continues. A conversation cut short by circumstance or courage. The symposium provides the space to complete these exchanges, or at least to continue them, as some conversations may never truly conclude. And you ask, what conversation brings you here? She smiles, a hint of sadness softening her features. I come to speak with my father. We were estranged for decades. He died before we could reconcile in life, but here we've had the time we needed. She gestures toward an elderly man seated across the amphitheater, who seems to be watching for her return. Today might be our last session. We've said nearly everything that needed saying. The concept fascinates you. This opportunity to complete what was left unfinished, to find closure that life denied. You wonder who you might speak with if given the chance. What conversations from your own past remain open-ended? What words still need to be exchanged? If you wish to participate, the woman says, rising, simply focus on the person you seek. If they're willing, you'll find each other here. With a gentle touch on your shoulder, she makes her way back across the amphitheater to rejoin her father. Left alone, you consider her suggestion. Is there someone with whom you have unfinished business? Words left unspoken, questions, never asked answers, never given. You close your eyes, allowing your mind to drift through memories of relationships. Some that ended abruptly, others that faded gradually, still others that remained strong, but perhaps incomplete in some essential way. A particular face comes to mind, someone with whom your relationship was complicated, layered with things expressed and unexpressed, understood and misunderstood. You focus on this person, not sure what to expect, not even certain if you're ready for this conversation. When you open your eyes, they're sitting beside you. The recognition is immediate and mutual. They look as you remember them, yet somehow more essentially themselves, as if their appearance has aligned more perfectly with their inner nature. There's a moment of adjustment. The strangeness of this reunion in such an unexpected place. But then, as if the symposium itself facilitates the transition, you begin to talk. The conversation unfolds in ways that would have been impossible in life. The acoustic properties of the amphitheater seem to extend to emotional communication as well. You find yourself able to express thoughts and feelings with a clarity that once eluded you, and to hear the other's words without the static of defensiveness or misinterpretation. It's as if you're both speaking a more precise language, one in which the gap between intention and reception has narrowed almost to nothing. You discuss things long buried, disappointments and gratitudes, misunderstandings and moments of perfect communion. You revisit shared experiences, seeing them now from both perspectives, simultaneously understanding how the same event could be interpreted so differently through two sets of eyes. You acknowledge hurts, inflicted and received not with accusation or justification, but with the simple recognition that pain, like joy, is part of the complex tapestry of connection. There are moments of revelation. I never knew you felt that way. And moments of confirmation. I always sensed that even though you never said it, there is laughter that carries the release of tension held for too long, and there are stretches of comfortable silence, the kind that exists only between people who have moved beyond the need to fill every space with words. Around you, similar exchanges continue, some appearing to reach resolution, others opening new avenues of understanding that will require further conversation. You notice that as certain pairs or groups conclude their dialogues, they embrace or clasp hands before departing separately, each seemingly lighter for having completed the exchange. Your own conversation reaches not an end, but a natural pause, a moment of mutual recognition that something significant has shifted between you. The person who once seemed so complicated now appears transparent, their motivations and actions comprehensible in a way they never were before, and you sense that they see you with the same clarity, the same compassion, the same acceptance of your full flawed humanity. Will we speak again? You ask, unsure of the protocols of this place, uncertain whether one conversation is all that's permitted or if the dialogue can continue indefinitely. If there's more to say, they reply with a smile that acknowledges how much has already been exchanged. Then, with a gesture that somehow communicates both farewell and continued connection, they rise and make their way up the steps of the amphitheater, eventually disappearing from view. You remain seated, absorbing the experience, aware of how this single conversation has altered your understanding not just of this particular relationship, but of all your connections. In the world above, so much remained unspoken, sometimes out of fear, sometimes out of the simple limitations of time and circumstance. Here, in this acoustic crucible, designed for honest exchange, those limitations fall away, allowing for a purity of communication that feels like both a gift and a challenge. As you prepare to continue your journey, a new voice addresses you, one of the symposium's attendants, identifiable by their simple gray robes and attentive expression. You are welcome to return, they tell you. Many souls visit the symposium repeatedly throughout their time in the underworld. Some conversations require multiple sessions to complete, and new dialogues may become necessary as your understanding evolves. You thank them already, considering who else you might speak with when you return. What other relationships might benefit from this opportunity for perfect understanding? As you rise and make your way toward the exit at the far side of the amphitheater, you pass dozens of souls engaged in their own essential exchanges, each conversation a thread being carefully untangled from the complex weave of human connection. The path beyond the symposium curves along the hillside before descending toward a distant plain. As you walk, you find yourself mentally revisiting the conversation you just experienced, appreciating not just what was said, but the quality of the exchange itself, the rare joy of being fully heard and of truly listening in return. It strikes you that this perhaps is one of the purposes of the afterlife, not just to continue existing, but to understand more deeply the connections that defined your existence in the first place. With this thought accompanying you, you follow the path onward, carrying a new appreciation for the power of words spoken with honesty and received with grace, and for the healing that can occur when conversations like souls themselves are given the time and space they need to reach completion. The path descending from the symposium eventually levels out, leading you across a landscape that grows increasingly strange. The ground beneath your feet, once solid, begins to feel slightly yielding, as if you're walking on a surface that isn't quite committed to its solidity. The omnipresent light of the underworld, usually so even and diffuse, starts to behave oddly, gathering in pools on the ground, flowing like water down gentle inclines, collecting in depressions where it glows with varying intensities. As you continue forward, you realize what you're seeing. Time itself has become visible, materialized into a substance that behaves like a liquid. The pools of light are actually pools of time, places where duration has collected, becoming almost tangible. Some are small puddle-sized collections that glow softly. Others are pond-like expanses that pulse with a stronger luminescence. And in the distance you can see what appears to be a vast lake of accumulated time, its surface shimmering with complex patterns of light and shadow. The path leads directly to this temporal lake, and as you approach, you notice figures gathered around its shores. Some stand at the very edge, allowing the liquid time to lap at their feet. Others wade knee-deep, looking down at the glowing substance with expressions of wonder or contemplation. A few have waded further out, immersed up to their waists or chests, their forms becoming slightly blurred, as if the boundaries between their being and the medium surrounding them are beginning to dissolve. At the shore, you're met by a figure who seems more substantial than most souls you've encountered. A woman with silver hair and eyes that shift color as you watch cycling through shades that remind you of dawn, noon, dusk, and midnight. She wears robes that flow like the liquid time itself, their color impossible to pin down always, in the process of becoming something else. "Welcome to the pools of duration," she says, her voice containing echoes of different ages, sometimes sounding youthful, sometimes mature, sometimes ancient, all within the space of a single sentence. "I am Kairos Tender of the temporal waters." "What is this place?" you ask, gesturing toward the lake, where souls stand in various states of immersion. This is where time once experienced as a linear progression reveals its true nature. Kairos explains, "In life you moved through time, as if it were a river carried from past to future, without the ability to step outside its flow. Here, time pools and collects, becoming a medium you can enter deliberately, rather than a current that carries you without consent." You look out over the shimmering surface of the lake, noticing how it changes color and intensity in patterns too complex to predict. And these souls, what are they doing? Experiencing time differently. Cairo says, some revisit moments from their lives, not as memories viewed from outside, but as experiences they can re-enter and explore from new perspectives. Others are discovering how to exist in what you might call the eternal present, a state where past, present, and future lose their distinction, allowing for a different quality of awareness. The concept is difficult to grasp, accustomed as you are to thinking of time as a straight line, moving in one direction only, seeing it pooled like water, behaving like a substance that can be entered and exited at will, challenges your most basic assumptions about how existence works. Would you like to try? Kairos asks, gesturing toward the shore, where the liquid time laps in gentle waves. There's no obligation to wade deeply at first. Many begin by simply touching the surface, allowing time to reintroduce itself on its own terms. Curious but cautious, you approach the edge of the temporal lake. The substance that laps at the shore glows with a soft, inviting luminescence. It doesn't look dangerous. Indeed, the souls immersed in it appear peaceful, even joyful. But you understand, instinctively, that entering these waters will alter your experience in fundamental ways. You kneel at the shore and tentatively extend your hand, allowing your fingertips to break the surface of the pooled time. The sensation is unlike anything you felt before. Not wet exactly, but enveloping in a way that water isn't. It feels like awareness itself has become tactile, like consciousness has acquired a texture that can be physically experienced. As your fingers remain in contact with the temporal substance, you begin to perceive time differently. The strict division between past, present, and future starts to blur. You become aware of multiple moments simultaneously, not in confusion, but in a sort of expanded perception that allows you to hold various points in time within your attention at once. You see yourself as a child experiencing the world with fresh wonder, as an adult navigating complexity with hard-won wisdom, as an elder viewing life with the perspective that only years can bring. But these aren't separate memories viewed in sequence. They're concurrent aspects of your existence, all equally present, all equally valid components of who you are. Withdrawing your hand, you find that the experience has left you slightly dazed, but also exhilarated. The rigid boundaries you once placed between different phases of your life seem suddenly arbitrary, constructs of a linear perception that no longer feels necessary or even natural. That's just the surface, Kairos says, with a knowing smile. Those who wade deeper experience even more profound reorientations of temporal perception. Looking out at the souls standing waist deep in the glowing substance, you can see how they appear slightly different from those on shore. Their forms seem more fluid, less bound by the strict definitions of individualized existence. They exist in a state of gentle flux. They're being spread across multiple moments. Simultaneously, their consciousness expanded beyond the narrow window of the present moment. Further out, still where the temporal waters deepen, souls become even less distinct, their forms blending partially with the medium itself, their individuality maintained, but somehow expanded to include more than just their own experience. They seem to be participating in a shared temporal awareness, experiencing not just their own lives, but the broader patterns of existence itself. Is it safe? You ask, both drawn to and slightly intimidated by the profound alteration of consciousness that seems to occur in the deeper waters. Kairos considers your question with a thoughtful expression. Safety isn't quite the right concept, she says finally. Nothing here will harm you in the way you're accustomed to thinking about harm. But yes, immersion in temporal awareness can be disorienting, especially for souls newly arrived from the linear experience of mortal life. That's why most begin as you did, with small exposures, gradually wading deeper as they become comfortable with expanded perception. You watch as a soul near the shore tentatively steps into the glowing substance, their expression shifting from uncertainty to wonder as the liquid time rises to their ankles. Nearby, another soul who has been standing chest deep for what might be minutes or might be centuries begins to wade back toward shore, their form gradually becoming more defined, more localized in a single moment as they emerge from the deeper waters. There's no correct duration for immersion, Kairos explains, following your gaze. Some souls stay in the shallows for their entire afterlife content, with just a slight expansion of temporal awareness. Others wade directly to the deepest parts and remain there, preferring to exist in a state of complete temporal fluidity. Most move back and forth, alternating between different degrees of immersion according to their own internal rhythms. The concept is both beautiful and slightly overwhelming. This ability to choose your relationship with time rather than being subject to its unidirectional flow. In life, time was often an adversary, always running out, always moving too quickly through joyful moments and too slowly through difficult ones. Here it has become a medium to be explored, a substance with which to engage on your own terms. You find yourself drawn to wade in just a little deeper, to experience more of this strange new relationship with temporality. Removing your shoes, you step into the glowing substance, allowing it to rise to your calves. The sensation is immediate, a further dissolution of the barriers between moments, a greater ability to perceive your existence as a unified whole, rather than a sequence of discrete experiences. From this slightly deeper vantage point, you begin to see patterns in your life that weren't visible when you were caught in time's linear flow. Events that seemed random or disconnected reveal their subtle relationships. Choices that appeared insignificant show their profound consequences unfolding across decades. The narrative of your life, once experienced as a straightforward progression from birth toward death, now appears as an intricate tapestry where each moment connects to countless others, where cause and effect operate not just forward, but in all directions simultaneously. It's not that time has ceased to exist, but rather that its true nature has been revealed. Less a river flowing in one direction than an ocean with currents moving in complex patterns, connecting all moments in a vast web of relation. After what might be minutes, or might be much longer, temporal perception being what it is in this place, you wade back to shore, carrying with you a new relationship with your own history. The strict divisions you once maintained between past and present have softened. The person you were and the person you are have begun to reconcile into a more integrated whole. Kairos watches your return with a knowing expression. The pools of duration will remain accessible throughout your time in the underworld, she says. Many souls return, repeatedly wading a little deeper, with each visit gradually acclimating to expanded temporal awareness. Nodding your thanks, you collect your shoes and return to the path which continues around the edge of the temporal lake before leading toward a distant grove of trees, unlike any you've seen before. As you walk, you notice that your perception of time hasn't quite returned to its former linearity. There's a new fluidity to your awareness, a greater capacity to exist in the present moment while maintaining connection with your past and openness to your future. This, you begin to understand, is one of the gifts of the afterlife. Not the cessation of time, but a more conscious, more deliberate relationship with its passage. In life, you were carried along by temporal currents. Here you're learning to swim. The path, leading away from the pools of duration, winds through a landscape that gradually becomes more vibrant, more sensually engaging than the muted terrains you've traversed thus far. Colors intensify subtly, the pale asphodels giving way to flowers with deeper hues, the gray-silver trees developing undertones of green and gold. The air itself seems thicker, carrying scents that weren't present before, hints of spice, sweetness, earth, and herb that awaken your sense of smell from its long dormancy. As you follow the increasingly fragrant path, you begin to hear sounds ahead, the gentle clink of utensils against plates, the murmur of conversation, occasional laughter. The path curves around a stand of aromatic trees, and you find yourself at the edge of what appears to be an enormous open-air dining hall. Long tables stretch in all directions, set with simple but elegant tableware. Souls sit together in groups of varying sizes, sharing what appears to be food and drink, though the substances on their plates glow with a subtle luminescence that marks them as something other than ordinary sustenance. A figure approaches as you stand taking in the scene. A woman with warm brown skin and eyes that crinkle at the corners when she smiles. She wears an apron over simple robes, and her hands bear the slight calluses of someone who works regularly with heat and implements. "Welcome to the banquet of sensory memory," she says, her voice as warm as her appearance. "I am Brass's keeper of tastes and scents, guardian of the flavors that defined your earthly existence." People eat in the afterlife, you ask, surprised by this most physical of activities, taking place in a realm that has until now seemed increasingly focused on the immaterial aspects of existence. Brosis laughs a sound as rich and satisfying as the aromas surrounding you. Not from necessity, no. The hunger that drives mortal consumption doesn't exist here. What you're witnessing is remembrance through taste, souls reconnecting with their embodied existence through the flavors that once defined their lives. Looking more closely at the dining souls, you notice the expressions of deep emotion that cross their faces as they taste the glowing substances on their plates. Some close their eyes in evident bliss, others appear on the verge of tears. Still others look surprised, as if rediscovering something long forgotten. "Would you care to join us?" Brosis asks, gesturing toward an empty place at one of the tables. The banquet welcomes all who wish to remember through taste. Curious about this new dimension of afterlife experience, you follow her to the indicated seat. The table is already occupied by several other souls, all focused on their plates, with expressions of deep concentration. They acknowledge your arrival with nods or small smiles before returning to their sensory explorations. As you take your seat, a plate appears before you, empty for now, awaiting your choices. Beside it rest utensils that seem both familiar and slightly strange, as if designed for a cuisine you haven't yet encountered. How does this work? You ask Brosis, who has remained standing beside you, apparently serving as your guide to this new experience. Simply think of a flavor that held meaning for you in life, she explains. Not just any food you consumed, but those tastes that became part of your story, meals that marked important moments, flavors that connected you to your culture or family, the sensory experiences that, when recalled, bring back not just the taste itself, but the entire context of significant moments. You close your eyes thinking back through the countless meals of your lifetime. Which flavors defined you? Which tastes, when remembered, bring back not just the sensation on your tongue, but the fullness of moments that mattered? An image comes to mind, a simple dish, prepared by someone who loved you, eaten at a table where you felt completely at home. As the memory crystallizes, you open your eyes to find that your previously empty plate now holds a small portion of softly glowing food, its appearance exactly matching your recollection. Go ahead, Brosis encourages. Taste and remember. You lift a small portion to your lips, uncertain what to expect. The moment the food touches your tongue, sensation floods through you. Not just the flavor itself, though that's present in all its complexity, but the entire sensory context of the original experience. You taste the dish exactly as it was prepared then, but you will also feel the chair beneath you, hear the familiar voices around the table, see the expressions on beloved faces, smell the mingled aromas of the full meal and the surrounding environment. Most powerfully, you feel the emotions of that moment, the sense of belonging, of being loved, of existing within a web of connections that defined and supported you. The experience is so vivid, so complete, that for a moment you're fully transported back to that time and place. It's not just a memory viewed from a distance, but a complete re-immersion in the original experience, allowing you to notice details that passed unappreciated then. The exact quality of light through the window, the pattern of the tablecloth, the particular cadence of a loved one's laugh. In the suspended moment of this sensory remembrance, you have the opportunity to appreciate fully what might have been experienced only partially when first lived. As the intensity of the recollection gradually subsides, you find yourself back at the banquet table, the lingering flavor on your tongue, now a bridge between past and present, rather than a complete transportation. Looking around, you see that the other diners are having similar experiences, their expressions shifting as they move between present awareness and sensory remembrance. Each taste offering a temporary doorway back to significant moments. It's different for everyone, Brosis says, noting your wonder. For some, the most powerful taste memories connect to celebrations, wedding feasts, holiday gatherings, achievement, commemorations. For others, It's the everyday meals that carried the deepest significance. The breakfast shared with family before scattering to daily tasks, the simple dinner that marked the reliable rhythm of domestic life. There's no hierarchy of importance. Here, what matters is what mattered to you. You think of another flavor memory, different from the first, connected to another time, another set of relationships, another chapter of your story. As the thought forms, your plate transforms the previous food, fading and being replaced by this new remembrance. Again, you taste, and again you're transported, not just to the flavor, but to the complete experience, the full sensory and emotional context of that moment. Around you, other souls are doing the same, cycling through the tastes that marked their lives, reconnecting with experiences that might otherwise fade as temporal distance increases. You realize that this is another form of the preservation work that seems to define much of the afterlife, not allowing significant experiences to dissipate entirely, but finding ways to maintain connection with what mattered, with what shaped you into the being you ultimately became. Some souls spend great spans of time here, Brosis tells you, working their way through every meaningful meal of their lives, using taste as a gateway to full sensory recollection. Others return periodically, focusing on particular eras or relationships they wish to keep fresh in their awareness. The banquet accommodates all approaches. As you continue to explore your own culinary history, you notice something interesting happening. The more recent taste memories come through with perfect clarity. Every nuance of flavor, every surrounding detail intact. But as you reach further back, calling up earlier experiences, the recreations become slightly less precise. The flavors themselves remain accurate, but some of the contextual details have begun to blur. Faces less distinct, conversations harder to recall fully, settings more impressionistic than photographic. Yes, Brosis says, when you mention this observation, sensory memory behaves much like other forms of remembrance. The more distant the original experience, the more subject to the natural erosion of detail. The banquet can recreate only what you've retained, though sometimes the taste itself can serve as a key unlocking aspects of the memory that seemed lost but were merely buried beneath layers of subsequent experience. This proves true as you continue your exploration. A particularly significant flavor from early childhood brings back details you thought were gone forever. The exact sound of a parent's voice, the feeling of smallness in a world built for larger beings, the intense emotions that accompanied early experiences of pleasure and connection. The taste serves as an anchor, allowing other aspects of the memory to reassemble themselves around this sensory core. Eventually, you reach a natural pause in your explorations. While there are countless other taste memories you could revisit, you feel satisfied for now having reconnected with several of the flavor experiences that shaped your sense of self and belonging in the world. The plate before you fades to emptiness, ready for future explorations should you return to the banquet. Thank you, you tell Brosis, as you prepare to continue your journey. I hadn't realized how much of my life was stored in these flavors, how many significant moments were anchored in the experience of taste. She smiles with evident pleasure at your appreciation. The body's knowledge is profound, she says, often deeper than the mind's understanding. Here, where embodiment becomes optional rather than mandatory, we find that many souls still choose to reconnect with the sensory experiences that defined their earthly existence. The banquet will remain available to you throughout your time in the underworld, should you wish to return and explore further. Rising from the table, you notice that the path continues beyond the banquet area, winding toward what appears to be a range of low hills in the distance. As you prepare to follow it, Brosis offers a final observation. You might find, she says, that having reconnected with these sensory memories, your experience of the underworld itself becomes richer. The tastes you've revisited serve as reminders of your embodied history, keeping you connected to the full spectrum of what it meant to exist as a physical being, even as you explore increasingly immaterial aspects of the afterlife. With a gesture that might be a blessing, she returns to her duties among the tables of dining souls. You set off along the path, once more aware of a new dimension to your experience, a heightened appreciation for the sensory aspects of existence that even in this afterlife realm continue to serve as anchors for meaning and connection. The path leading from the banquet of sensory memory gradually ascends into the range of low hills you observed from a distance. As you climb, the sounds of dining and conversation fade, behind you replaced by an increasingly profound silence. This isn't the absence of sound that you sometimes experienced in life. Those rare moments when human and mechanical noise temporarily subsided. This is a positive presence, a substance almost tangible in its density, filling the air around you like an invisible medium through which you move. At first, this deep quiet feels oppressive, a weight pressing against your ears, an emptiness demanding to be filled. You find yourself making small, unnecessary sounds as you walk, scuffing your feet against the path, clearing your throat, humming fragments of half-remembered melodies, anything to break the absolute stillness. But as you continue upward, something shifts in your relationship with the silence. You begin to perceive it not as an absence requiring remediation, but as a presence worthy of attention. Stopping your restless noise-making, you allow yourself to sink into the profound quiet. Gradually, you become aware that what you initially perceived as uniform silence actually contains subtle variations, textures, and densities as varied as those found in any symphony. There are pools of silence that feel restful, meditative, others that seem charged with potential, like the pause before an important pronouncement, still others that carry a melancholy quality, like the hush that follows significant loss. The path crests a hill, revealing a vast basin spread below, a natural amphitheater several miles across its sloping sides, dotted with seated figures. Unlike the symposium, where conversation flourished, or the banquet, where the sounds of dining created a constant background murmur, this gathering is characterized by complete stillness. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of souls sit in concentric circles, their attention focused on the center of the basin, where a single figure stands motionless. As you watch, trying to understand what's occurring, a presence materializes beside you, a tall, slender being wearing robes that seem woven from mist. Their features are indistinct, shifting subtly as you try to focus on them, but their voice when they speak is clear and melodious, despite being barely above a whisper. Welcome to the basin of eloquent silence, they say. I am Siege Keeper of the unsaid guardian of the spaces between words. What's happening down there? You ask your own voice, automatically matching their hushed tone. Communion through shared silence, Sige explains. In life, silence was often uncomfortable, a gap to be filled, a void that created anxiety. Here, souls learn to experience silence as a form of communication in itself, rich with meaning that words often obscure rather than reveal. Looking more closely at the gathered souls, you notice that while they sit in physical stillness, their expressions are anything but static. Emotions move across their faces like weather systems. Joy, sorrow, wonder, understanding, all shared without a single word being exchanged. The figure at the center seems to be a focal point for this silent communion, their stillness, somehow more complete, more intentional than that of the observers. Would you care to join? CJ asks. There's always room for another participant. Curious about this form of wordless exchange, you nod. CJ leads you down a narrow path that winds between the seated figures. No one acknowledges your passage. With so much as a glance, all attention remains fixed on the central figure and the quality of silence they're somehow generating. Finding an empty space in one of the outer circles, you settle onto the soft ground. Sigs remains standing behind you, a supportive presence as you attempt to integrate yourself into this unfamiliar practice. Simply be still, they advise, their voice so quiet it might be coming from within your own mind. Allow yourself to experience the silence, not as an absence, but as a presence with its own intelligence, its own purpose. Following this guidance, you quiet your body and with greater difficulty, your mind. The habits of internal chatter, the constant commentary, planning, remembering, and projecting that occupied your consciousness in life prove resistant to this practice of stillness. Your thoughts continue to generate noise, even as your surroundings maintain their perfect quiet. Gradually, however, the quality of the silence around you begins to penetrate your internal clamor. Like water slowly filling a vessel, the external quiet seeps into your awareness, creating small pools of stillness within your mind. These expand, connecting with one another, until you find yourself experiencing moments of complete internal silence, gaps between thoughts that, rather than being empty, feel charged with a presence both foreign and strangely familiar. In these gaps, something unexpected occurs. You begin to perceive the consciousness of those around you, not their thoughts exactly, which would be expressible in words, but their states of being, their emotional textures, their essential qualities of awareness. It's as if, in the absence of verbal communication, a more fundamental form of connection has become available, a direct perception of presence that bypasses the filtering mechanisms of language. The figure at the center of the basin seems to be facilitating this connection, their own silence creating a field that amplifies everyone's capacity for wordless communion. Through this shared stillness, emotions and realizations move through the gathered souls like currents through water, sometimes gentle, sometimes intense, but always part of a collective experience that transcends individual boundaries without erasing the distinctiveness of each participant. You find yourself swept into this silent exchange without words to separate your experience from others. You discover a form of intimacy, both more immediate and less intrusive than verbal sharing. There's no need to construct narratives or explanations. The raw material of emotion and awareness flows directly, allowing for a recognition of shared humanity that transcends the usual barriers of personality and history. Sadness moves through the gathering, not originating from any particular soul, but arising as a shared acknowledgement of the losses that accompany existence. You feel it pass through you like a wave touching your own experiences of grief without becoming trapped in the specific stories attached to them. Then comes a current of joy, simple, unelaborated delight in being, followed by wonder, compassion, acceptance, and other states that defy easy categorization. Throughout this wordless communion, you maintain your distinct identity. This isn't a merging or dissolution of self, but rather a more permeable form of selfhood, one that allows for direct recognition of what you share with others, without requiring the surrender of what makes you uniquely you. Time passes differently in this state of shared silence. What might be minutes, or might be hours, unfolds without the usual markers of duration. The experience has its own internal rhythm, its own sense of completion that doesn't depend on external measures. Eventually, a subtle shift occurs. The quality of silence changes, becoming lighter, less charged with collective emotion. The figure at the center makes a small gesture, a slight raising of their hands, and the communion begins to dissolve, each soul gently returning to a more individuated state of consciousness. As the experience concludes, those seated closest to the center rise first and begin to depart, following paths that lead out of the basin in various directions. There's no rush, no chatter to break the lingering quiet. Each soul moves with deliberate slowness, preserving the residual silence, like a precious substance that might spill if handled carelessly. Saj's hand touches your shoulder, lightly indicating that it's time for you to continue your journey as well. Rising, you follow them back up the path by which you entered, still maintaining the silence that now feels more natural than speech. Only when you've crested the hill and the basin is hidden from view does Siege break the quiet. What did you experience? They ask, their voice still soft, but no longer a whisper. You find it challenging to translate the wordless communion into language. Connection, you say finally. Understanding without explanation. Emotion without narrative. Saiga nods, apparently satisfied with this limited articulation of an experience that by its nature resists verbal description. The basin offers a form of communication that wasn't easily accessible in embodied life, they explain, though even there, in rare moments of deep intimacy or shared experience, you might have glimpsed this possibility, the direct recognition that exists in the spaces between words. You think back to your lifetime, recalling moments when silence indeed spoke more eloquently than language. The quiet presence of someone sitting with you in grief, the wordless exchange of a glance that conveyed perfect understanding, the shared stillness after profound beauty, or revelation when speech would have diminished rather than enhanced the experience. The basin will remain available to you, Sige says, as they indicate the path that continues over the hill and down toward a distant shoreline. Many souls return regularly throughout their time in the underworld, finding that this practice of eloquent silence complements other forms of connection and understanding. You express your gratitude with a nod, words still feeling somewhat superfluous after the profound wordlessness you've just experienced. Sige acknowledges your thanks with a slight bow before dissolving back into the mist from which they seemed to form, leaving you alone on the hilltop. As you begin your descent toward the distant shore, you carry with you a new appreciation for the communicative power of silence, not as the absence of expression, but as a form of connection that transcends the limitations of language. The quiet between words you now understand isn't empty space, but fertile ground where the most profound forms of understanding can take root and flourish. The path descending from the hills of silence leads you toward a shoreline unlike any you've encountered before. As you approach, you notice that what appeared from a distance to be an ocean is actually a vast river, its far bank visible only as a hazy line on the horizon. The water itself is strange, neither blue nor clear, but a shifting pearlescent white that seems to contain all colors and none simultaneously. It flows with deliberate slowness, its surface unmarked by waves, but occasionally swirling in complex patterns that form and dissolve like thoughts passing through consciousness. The shore is lined with pale sand that glitters faintly, as if each grain contains a tiny light source. Figures move along this glittering beach, some walking contemplatively at the water's edge, allowing the pearlescent river to lap at their feet, others sitting and gazing out at the slow-moving current, still others engaged in what appears to be a ritual of some kind, collecting water in cupped hands and either releasing it back into the river or occasionally bringing it to their lips. As you stand taking in this scene, a figure approaches, a woman of indeterminate age, wearing simple robes of a color that matches the river's pearlescent hue. Her eyes are the most striking feature of her face, pale, almost colorless, yet somehow containing depth that suggests wisdom accumulated over countless centuries. "You've reached the river Lethe," she says by way of greeting. "I am Lethe's keeper, guardian of forgetting, steward of release." The name stirs something in your memory, fragments of old stories about the rivers of the underworld. Lethe, you repeat, the river of forgetfulness. The keeper nods pleased by your recognition. In the mythology of your world, souls were said to drink from Lethe before reincarnation, forgetting their previous lives before beginning anew. The reality, as you're discovering, is more nuanced. Lethe offers not oblivion, but selective release, the opportunity to let go of what no longer serves to be unburdened, of memories that have become weights rather than wings. Looking more closely at the souls along the shoreline, you notice that those who have consumed the river water appear somehow lighter, more translucent, as if parts of their being have been gently erased. Yet they don't seem diminished by this partial forgetting. Rather, they move with a new ease, free from whatever they've chosen to release. Is it safe? You ask, watching, as another soul cups their hands in the pearlescent water, considers for a long moment, then raises their hands to their lips. That depends on what you mean by safety, the keeper replies. Lethe doesn't destroy indiscriminately. It responds to intention. Those who approach the river with clear purpose release only what they consciously choose to let go. But those who come in confusion or ambivalence may find the waters unpredictable in what they wash away. This explanation makes you more curious than concerned. After all you've experienced in the underworld, the careful preservation of memory in so many forms, this place dedicated to deliberate forgetting seems to offer an important counterbalance. Perhaps not all memories deserve eternal conservation. Perhaps some are better released, making space for whatever comes next in this afterlife journey. Would you like to approach the waters? The keeper asks, seeing your interest. There's no obligation to drink, but many find it illuminating simply to stand at the shore and consider what they might choose to release if given the opportunity. Nodding your assent, you follow her down to the water's edge. The pearlescent river seems even stranger up close, its substance neither fully liquid nor quite vapor, moving with a fluidity that suggests consciousness rather than mere physical flow. Standing with your feet just touching the river's edge, you feel a curious sensation, as if the water is gently testing your memories, sorting through them without invasion, merely taking inventory of what you carry. What do people choose to forget? You ask, watching as a soul further down the beach decisively drinks from cupped hands, their form immediately becoming slightly more transparent, though their expression suggests relief rather than loss. Many things, the keeper answers, traumas that continue to cause pain, even here in the afterlife, grudges that have outlived their purpose, regrets that cannot be resolved through any action or understanding, shameful moments that have been sufficiently learned from and no longer need to be carried as burden, sorrows that have been fully honored but now only prevent new joy, even excess knowledge that crowds out wisdom or certainties that block new understanding. You consider your own collection of memories, the joyful ones you've revisited in various ways throughout your journey, but also the painful ones you've carried largely untouched. Are there experiences you'd choose to release, if given the opportunity, memories that have served whatever purpose they once had and now only weigh you down? The keeper seems to sense your internal questioning. There's no right answer, she says, gently. Some souls approach Lethe multiple times throughout their existence here, releasing different burdens as they become ready. Others never drink, choosing to remain fully intact, carrying all their memories as essential components of their identity. Neither path is inherently better. What matters is the consciousness with which the choice is made. As you stand considering, you notice something interesting happening at the river's edge, where the water touches your feet. Certain memories seem to be drawn toward the contact point, rising to the surface of your consciousness as if responding to the river's call. These aren't random recollections, but specifically those tinged with pain or regret that hasn't fully resolved. Experiences you've carried, not because they continue to offer valuable lessons, but because you haven't found a way to set them down. The keeper observes this process with knowing eyes. Lethe has its own wisdom, she says. It recognizes what you're ready to release, even when you yourself may be uncertain. Kneeling at the river's edge, you allow your hand to hover just above the pearlescent surface. You don't touch the water yet, but even this proximity intensifies the process, bringing specific memories into sharper focus, memories of hurt and failure and loss that have been fully experienced, fully understood, yet still occupy space in your consciousness that might be available for new growth if they were released. If I choose to drink, you ask, what exactly happens? Do these memories disappear completely? The keeper considers your question carefully before answering. Not exactly. They're not erased in the sense of being destroyed. Rather, they're transformed. Their emotional charge is neutralized. Their hold on your attention is released. You retain the knowledge that these experiences occurred and whatever wisdom you gained from them, but without the accompanying pain or attachment. It's a form of completion rather than erasure. This nuanced explanation helps clarify your thinking. Complete forgetting would mean losing parts of your story, parts of what shaped you. But this selective emotional release offers the possibility of carrying your full history without being defined or limited by its most painful chapters. After further reflection, you make your decision. Cupping your hands, you dip them into the pearlescent river. The water, if it can be called that, feels neither warm nor cold, but vibrant with a strange energy that seems to resonate with your own consciousness. You raise your hands, watching as the luminous liquid pools in your palms, shifting and swirling as if alive. In the moment before you drink, you set your intention clearly, focusing on those specific memories that have completed their purpose in your development experiences, fully processed, that now serve only as unnecessary weight. Then with deliberate movement you bring your cupped hands to your lips and drink. The sensation is unlike anything you've experienced. Not a taste exactly, but a feeling of gentle dissolution spreading from your core outward. The memories you've chosen to release don't vanish in a flash, but rather begin a process of transformation, their emotional intensity gradually neutralizing their grip on your attention, slowly loosening. You can still recall the basic facts of these experiences, but they no longer carry the same charge, the same power to pull you back into old patterns of feeling and thinking. As this transformation completes itself, you experience a subtle lightening, not of your physical form, which remains as substantial as before, but of your emotional and mental being. Space has been created where once there was constriction. Possibility has replaced fixation. You haven't lost parts of yourself, but rather released their hold on your present, awareness-freeing energy that can now be directed toward whatever comes next in your afterlife journey. The keeper watches this process with evident satisfaction. Well done, she says. Conscious release is one of the most valuable skills a soul can develop. Knowing when to hold on and when to let go, understanding the difference between memories that continue to serve growth and those that have completed their purpose. You stand feeling subtly but significantly changed by the experience. The memories you chose to release haven't disappeared. You can still access them if you direct your attention their way, but they no longer call to you unbidden, no longer occupy emotional space that might be filled with new experience. Lethe will remain available to you, the keeper says, as she indicates the path continuing along the shoreline. Many souls return periodically throughout their time in the underworld, releasing different burdens as they become ready. The river's wisdom lies in its patience. It doesn't demand or judge, but simply offers the possibility of unburdening when the time is right. Thanking her for this guidance, you begin walking along the shore, following the path as it traces the river's edge, before gradually turning inland once more. As you walk, you're conscious of the subtle but significant shift in your inner landscape, the newfound lightness that comes not from escaping your past, but from changing your relationship with it, carrying forward what serves your continued growth, while releasing what doesn't. This, you realize, is another of the afterlife's gifts, not just the preservation of what matters, but also the conscious intentional release of what no longer does, creating space for whatever transformations still await as your journey through the underworld continues. The path leading away from the river Lethe gradually ascends, winding upward through terrain that becomes increasingly varied. Patches of luminous flowers giving way to stands of silver-barked trees, open meadows transitioning to rocky outcroppings. As you climb, you notice a curious phenomenon. Your shadow, which has been a barely perceptible companion throughout your journey, begins to deepen and clarify, taking on substance and definition beyond what the diffuse light of the underworld should allow. Looking down, you see that your shadow no longer mimics your movements exactly. It follows the general pattern of your walking stopping, when you stop turning, when you turn, but with subtle variations, hesitating a moment longer than you do, gesturing slightly differently, occasionally adopting postures that feel familiar, yet aren't precisely what your body is doing at that moment. As you continue upward, these discrepancies become more pronounced. Your shadow begins to exhibit what can only be described as independence, not complete separation from you, but a distinct autonomy within the parameters of its shadowy existence. When you pause to examine a particularly beautiful flower, your shadow kneels beside you, but reaches toward a different bloom. When you step carefully over a fallen log, your shadow vaults it with unnecessary flourish. These differences aren't threatening, but rather intriguing, as if you're observing an alternative version of yourself, one that makes slightly different choices while remaining fundamentally connected to your essential nature. The path crests a hill, revealing a wide, circular valley spread below. The floor of this natural amphitheater appears to be covered in a substance darker than the surrounding terrain. Not soil or grass, but what looks from a distance like liquid shadow, a pool of darkness that nonetheless reflects the diffuse light of the underworld. Around this pool stand dozens of figures, each accompanied by a shadow that moves with the same semi-independence you've observed in your own. As you descend toward this gathering, a figure detaches from the group and approaches, a tall, slender being whose own shadow performs an elaborate dance around them as they walk, sometimes stretching impossibly long, other times condensing almost to nothing before expanding again in fluid, graceful movements. The being's features are difficult to discern seeming to shift between definition and blur, depending on how directly you focus on them. Welcome to the clearing of alternate selves, they say as they reach you, their voice containing curious echoes, as if multiple versions of the same voice are speaking in near-perfect unison. I am Skia Keeper, of Possibilities Guardian of the Roads, not taken. You gesture toward your increasingly autonomous shadow. What's happening? Skia smiles, or at least their features, arrange themselves in what seems to be the shadow equivalent of a smile. In the realm of the living shadows were mere absences of light-dark silhouettes cast by physical objects. Here, they become something more, manifestations of alternative possibilities, versions of yourself that might have existed had you made different choices, followed different paths, developed different aspects of your potential. Looking around at the gathered souls, you notice how their shadows behave, some mirroring their owners closely, with only minor variations, others engaging in dramatically different activities, a few appearing to be in active dialogue with the souls that cast them. The pool of darkness at the center of the clearing seems to be the focus of this activity, with several souls and their shadows engaged in what looks like a choreographed interaction at its edge. As you approach the deeper regions of the underworld, Skia continues, the boundaries between what is and what might have been grow thinner. Your shadow self becomes more accessible, allowing for recognition, integration, and occasionally reconciliation with the paths not taken during your lifetime. You look down at your own shadow, which now stands beside you rather than behind or beneath you. It has your general shape and proportions, but holds itself differently, standing straighter perhaps, or with a slight tilt of the head that suggests a confidence or perspective, subtly different from your own. It feels not like an entirely separate entity, but rather like another version of yourself, a variation on the theme of your being that developed some qualities you left relatively unexplored. Would you like to engage more directly? Skia asks, gesturing toward the dark pool at the center of the clearing. The mirror of alternatives offers a deeper connection with your shadow self and those of others, a space where the boundaries between actuality and possibility become permeable enough for meaningful exchange. Curious about this aspect of afterlife exploration, you nod your assent. As you approach the pool, your shadow moves with increasing independence, sometimes walking beside you, sometimes ahead, occasionally turning to face you, as if eager for more direct communication. The other souls and shadows around the pool's edge acknowledge your approach with nods or gestures, then return their attention to whatever interactions they were engaged in before. Standing at the edge of the dark pool, you see that it's not actually liquid, but something more complex, a substance that seems to exist in multiple states, simultaneously, sometimes appearing solid enough to walk on, other times vaporous and penetrable, always shifting in response to the intentions of those engaging with it. Your shadow steps onto this surface without hesitation, turning to face you with a gesture that seems to invite you to follow. The mirror supports your weight. Skia assures you, seeing your uncertainty. It responds to consciousness, providing a medium where you and your shadow self can interact more directly. Taking a deep breath, you step onto the dark surface. It feels solid beneath your feet, but somehow responsive, as if adjusting itself to your specific gravity. Your shadow approaches, no longer bound to the limitations of its role as silhouette. In this space, it appears more substantial, not fully corporeal, but defined enough that you can discern features, expressions, even a sense of presence that feels distinctly conscious. Standing face to face with this alternative version of yourself is both unsettling and fascinating. The shadow self looks like you, but with subtle differences that suggest a life lived with different emphases, perhaps more attention to certain qualities or potentials, less to others. Its eyes, though still formed of shadow substance, regard you with evident intelligence and what feels like recognition. You can communicate here, Skia says, from the edge of the pool. Not with words as you understand them, but through a more direct exchange of awareness. Simply open yourself to the possibility of connection following this guidance. You relax your usual boundaries, allowing your consciousness to extend toward this shadow version of yourself. The response is immediate, a flow of impressions, memories, emotions, and understanding moving between you and your alternate self. This isn't telepathy exactly, but something more fundamental, a direct recognition between two variations of the same essential being. Through this exchange, you begin to understand what your shadow self represents, a version of you that made different choices at key junctures, that cultivated different aspects of your shared potential, that responded to similar circumstances in ways that led down alternate pathways of development. You see moments from a life that parallels your own, but diverges in fascinating ways. Choices made differently, relationships formed, or not formed, paths taken, or not taken, all stemming from the same starting point, but flowing toward different expressions of your fundamental nature. What's most striking about this encounter isn't the differences between you and your shadow self, though these are certainly intriguing. Rather, it's the recognition of underlying continuity, the awareness that beneath the variations in choice and circumstance there exists a core identity that remains consistent. Your shadow isn't a stranger, but another manifestation of your essential being, one that explored different facets of the same fundamental potential. As this understanding deepens, something unexpected begins to happen. The boundaries between you and your shadow self start to blur, not in a threatening way that suggests loss of identity, but in an integrative process that feels like completion. Aspects of your shadow's experience begin to merge with your own consciousness, not overriding your memories, but supplementing them with alternative perspectives, additional wisdom, complementary understanding. Looking around you, notice that similar processes are occurring throughout the mirror of alternatives. Souls and shadows engaged in exchanges that range from tentative recognition to complete integration. Some pairs maintain their distinctness while engaging in what appears to be ongoing dialogue. Others merge, partially exchanging specific qualities or insights. A few complete the integration process entirely, the shadow disappearing as its unique aspects are fully absorbed into the primary consciousness. Each soul approaches this encounter differently. Skia explains, seeing your observation, some prefer to maintain the separation, finding value in ongoing dialogue with their alternative selves. Others choose partial integration, incorporating specific qualities while preserving the shadow as a distinct entity. Still others embrace complete reunion, absorbing all that their shadow represents back into their primary consciousness. Your own interaction falls somewhere in the middle of this spectrum. Certain aspects of your shadow self merge with your awareness. Perspectives, capacities, and understandings that complement your own development. But the shadow itself doesn't disappear entirely. Rather, it takes on a new relationship, with you becoming less an autonomous entity and more a conscious extension of yourself, accessible when needed, offering alternative viewpoints or approaches when helpful, but integrated enough that the boundary between you and it has softened significantly. As this new equilibrium establishes itself, you and your partially integrated shadow step off the mirror of alternatives, returning to the solid ground at the edge of the pool. Skia observes the results of your interaction with evident satisfaction. Well integrated, they comment. You've incorporated valuable aspects while maintaining the creative tension of distinction. Many souls find this balanced approach most fruitful in the long term. Looking down at your shadow, you notice that it now follows your movements more closely than before, though still with occasional variations that suggest its retained semi-autonomy. The experience has left you feeling more complete, not because you've absorbed something foreign, but because you've reconnected with aspects of your potential that were always present but less fully developed in the particular life path you followed. The clearing remains available to you, Skia says, as they indicate the path that continues beyond the valley. Many souls return periodically throughout their time in the underworld, finding that their relationship with their shadow self evolves as their understanding deepens. Some discover additional shadow aspects representing other alternative paths. Others work toward fuller integration of those already encountered. Thanking them for this guidance, you begin ascending the far side of the valley, your partially integrated shadow moving alongside you in a new dance of both synchronicity and variation. As you walk, you're conscious of an expanded sense of self, not larger in the sense of ego, inflation, but more comprehensive in your understanding of your own potential, more appreciative of the many ways your fundamental nature might express itself, given different circumstances or choices. This, you realize, is another gift of the afterlife, the opportunity to reconcile with the roads not taken, to recognize that the particular path you followed in life wasn't the only valid expression of your being, but simply one manifestation of a potential that remains even here, rich with alternative possibilities. The path ascending from the clearing of alternate selves leads you through increasingly varied terrain, stretches of luminous meadow giving way to groves of trees with leaves that chime softly in a breeze. You can barely feel rocky outcroppings that seem to shift position when viewed from different angles. Your shadow continues to accompany you, sometimes walking beside you, sometimes merging with your own silhouette, its semi-autonomy now feeling like a natural extension of your expanded sense of self. As you crest a particularly steep slope, you find yourself overlooking a vast circular plain, unlike any landscape you've encountered thus far in the underworld. Rather than a single environment, this plain appears to contain samples of every terrain you've passed through, sections of forest, meadow, shore, and hill, arranged in a complex mosaic that somehow manages to feel cohesive despite its diversity. Rivers like the one you crossed upon arrival wind through the landscape, and in the far distance, you can see the dim outline of mountains, similar to those visible from the boat that first brought you to this realm. Scattered across this composite landscape are structures of various kinds, some resembling the memory buildings you saw in the fields of remembrance, others more like open pavilions or simple shelters. Souls move throughout this region, some alone, others in groups engaged in activities too distant to discern clearly. As you stand taking in this panorama, trying to make sense of its purpose, a figure approaches along the path behind you, an elderly man with kind eyes and a face mapped with lines that suggest both hardship and joy experienced in equal measure. He walks with the aid of a staff made from what appears to be driftwood, its surface worn smooth by long use. "The plains of acceptance," he says, by way of greeting, gesturing toward the landscape spread below. "I am Teleutaios, keeper of completion's guardian of the final reconciliations." Final. You ask something in the word, triggering a momentary anxiety. Does that mean my journey is ending? Teleutaios smiles gently. Not ending, no. The underworld is vast beyond your current understanding, with regions you've yet to encounter, experiences you've yet to have. But you are approaching a significant threshold, a point of integration where the various aspects of your journey thus far can be brought into meaningful relation with one another. Looking again at the composite landscape, you begin to understand its nature. Those are pieces of all the places I've been since arriving here, you say, recognizing fragments of the various terrains you've traversed. Yes, Teleutaios confirms. The plains of acceptance offer a space for synthesis, a place where the disparate elements of your afterlife experience can be recognized as components of a cohesive whole, rather than separate, disconnected encounters. This explanation resonates with something you've been feeling throughout your journey, a sense that each region of the underworld, each experience offered within it, represents not just an isolated aspect of existence, but part of a larger, more integrated understanding of what it means to be and to have been. Would you like to descend? Teleutaios asks. Many find it valuable to walk among these collected fragments, to experience directly how they relate to one another within the larger pattern of meaning. Nodding your assent, you follow him down a winding path that leads into the plains. As you draw closer to the composite landscape, you notice details that weren't visible from above. How the transitions between different terrains occur gradually, rather than abruptly. How structures that appeared separate from a distance are connected by subtle pathways. How the whole arrangement suggests not random juxtaposition, but meaningful relationship. Teleutaios leads you to a simple pavilion situated at what feels like the center of the plains. An open structure with a roof supported by columns that resemble the silver trees from the forest you passed through earlier. Within this shelter stands a large circular table made of a material that shifts subtly as you approach, sometimes appearing to be wood, other times stone or metal, or something not quite physical at all. The table of integration. Teleutaios explains as you enter the pavilion. Here souls can work directly with the symbols and experiences of their journey, arranging them into patterns that reveal deeper connections and meanings. The surface of the table appears empty at first glance, but as you look more closely, you notice faint outlines beginning to form, shapes and images that correspond to your experiences in the various regions of the underworld. The boat that carried you across, the initial river, the bag of memories you continue to carry, the fields of remembrance with their structures built from significant moments, the forest of abandoned treasures with its trees growing from relinquished possessions, the basin of eloquent silence with its wordless communion. All these and more appear as translucent representations on the table's surface, waiting to be engaged with. How does it work, you ask, fascinated by these manifestations of your journey? Simply touch the images that draw your attention, Teleutaios suggests. The table responds to both conscious intention and deeper awareness, helping to reveal connections you may not have consciously recognized. Following this guidance, you reach out and touch the image of the boat that first carried you into the underworld. It brightens at your touch, becoming more substantial, and simultaneously other images on the table's surface begin to pulse with corresponding illumination. The river Lethe, the pools of duration, other water-related elements of your journey forming a pattern of connection that suggests a theme running through your experiences. Water as passage, Teleutaios observes, watching the pattern emerge. The medium of transition of flow between states of being, a significant theme in your journey. You nod, recognizing the truth in this observation. From your initial crossing with Charon to your experiences at the pools of duration and the river Lethe water has indeed served as both literal and metaphorical medium for transition, the substance through which you've moved from one state of understanding to another. Next, you touch the image of the banquet of sensory memory. It illuminates, and again, corresponding images light up across the table. The silent communion in the basin, the conversations in the symposium, the taste memories that anchored significant experiences. Another pattern emerges, suggesting a theme of connection through various forms of communication and communion. The ways we reach across separation, Teleutaios says softly, through taste, through silence, through words both spoken and unspoken. The bridges between consciousness and consciousness. You continue this process, touching different images and watching as patterns of connection reveal themselves. Each time Teleutaios offers a gentle observation that helps crystallize the meaning emerging from these constellations of experience. What might have seemed like separate, disconnected aspects of your journey begin to cohere into a more integrated understanding. After exploring several such patterns, you notice something interesting. Certain images on the table remain constant across multiple configurations, serving as anchoring points that connect different thematic clusters. Your bag of memories, your shadow self from the clearing of alternate selves, the quality of light that permeates the underworld. Yes, Teleutaios says, seeing your recognition, these are your central themes, the elements that run through all aspects of your journey, providing continuity amid variation. They represent core aspects of your being that transcend particular experiences or understandings. This observation triggers a deeper realization. Throughout your journey through the underworld, You've been not just experiencing various aspects of afterlife existence, but integrating them into an evolving understanding of yourself, not the limited self defined by a single lifetime, but the expanded self that includes all you've been and all you might become. As this understanding crystallizes, the images on the table begin to move of their own accord, rearranging themselves into a pattern more complex than any you've consciously created. They form what appears to be a mandala, a circular design with your central themes at its core, and all other elements arranged in concentric rings around them, each in perfect relation to all others. The pattern of your becoming, Teleutaios, says his voice, filled with quiet appreciation. Unique to you, yet connected to patterns, universal to all consciousness. This is what the planes of acceptance offer. The recognition of your individual journey as both singular and part of a larger whole. You stare at the completed mandala, taking in its intricate beauty, its perfect balance of uniqueness and universality. There's something profoundly satisfying about seeing the various elements of your journey arranged in this way, each maintaining its distinct nature while participating in a larger coherence. What happens now? You ask, sensing that this integration represents a significant milestone in your afterlife journey. Teleutaios gestures toward a path leading away from the pavilion, one you hadn't noticed before. Now you continue. The integration you've experienced here doesn't end your journey, but enriches it, providing a foundation for whatever comes next. The Underworld contains realms beyond what you've seen, thus far experiences beyond what you've had. But you'll move through them with the benefit of this synthesis, carrying not just isolated understandings, but an integrated awareness that informs all future encounters. The mandala on the table begins to fade, but not in a way that suggests loss or erasure. Rather, it seems to be dissolving into your consciousness, becoming an internal compass rather than an external representation. You can feel its pattern settling into your awareness, providing an organizational framework that brings clarity to your accumulated experiences. Rising from the table, you thank Teleutaios for his guidance. He acknowledges your gratitude with a simple nod, then gestures again toward the new path. That way leads to what awaits you next. The planes of acceptance remain available should you wish to return later in your journey, when new experiences may require integration into your evolving understanding. As you leave the pavilion and set out along the indicated path, you feel a profound sense of completion. Not the completion that suggests ending, but the kind that establishes foundation for continued growth. The disparate experiences of your journey through the underworld have coalesced into a coherent narrative, one that acknowledges both the uniqueness of your individual path and its participation in patterns common to all consciousness. Your shadow walks beside you as you follow the path away from the plains, sometimes merging with your own silhouette, sometimes maintaining its distinct form. Like all elements of your journey, it has found its place in the integrated understanding you now carry, neither fully separate from nor identical to your primary self, but in dynamic, creative relationship with all that you are. The path ahead winds through terrain that seems both familiar and new, echoing landscapes you've already traversed, while introducing elements you haven't yet encountered. Just as your understanding has evolved through integration, so too has your perception of the underworld itself, revealing new dimensions within what might once have seemed familiar. With each step, you feel a deepening acceptance, not just of the individual experiences that have composed your journey, but of the larger pattern they form together. This acceptance isn't passive resignation, but active recognition, a conscious embrace of both the unique path you've traveled and its place within the universal journey of consciousness through form and beyond. This, you realize, is perhaps the most profound gift the underworld offers. Not escape from what has been, but integration of all experience into an ever-expanding understanding of what it means to exist, to perceive, to connect, and ultimately to transcend the boundaries that once seemed to define the limits of being. The path, leading from the plains of acceptance, gradually transitions into terrain unlike any you've encountered thus far in the underworld. The ground beneath your feet becomes increasingly translucent, revealing depths that shift and change as you walk. The omnipresent light no longer seems to come from an indeterminate source above, but emanates from within everything around you. The path itself, the sparse vegetation, even the air through which you move. Your shadow continues to accompany you, but it too has transformed, becoming less a separate entity and more a dimensional aspect of yourself. Sometimes walking beside you, sometimes merging with your form, always in fluid relationship with your primary consciousness. The bag of memories you've carried throughout your journey hangs at your side, its weight neither heavier nor lighter, but somehow more integrated into your being, as if the distinction between carrier and carried has begun to dissolve. After walking for what might be moments or might be ages, time having become increasingly fluid in your perception, you reach what appears to be the edge of a vast precipice. Beyond it stretches not emptiness, but something more complex, a realm of pure potential where form and formlessness interpenetrate, where what might be called reality exists in a state of constant becoming rather than fixed being. Standing at this threshold, you become aware of a presence beside you, not a distinct figure as with previous guides, but a quality of consciousness that communicates without words, that exists not separate from, but interwoven with the fabric of awareness itself, the horizon of transcendence. This presence conveys, not through speech, but through direct transmission of understanding, where the journey through form meets the journey beyond form. Looking out over this impossible landscape, at once empty and infinitely full still, and perpetually in motion, you recognize it as both destination and beginning, the place where the individual journey you've been following opens into something larger, more comprehensive, more fundamental than the narrative of a single consciousness moving through defined experience. What happens if I cross? You ask, though not with words. Your communication has begun to match the medium through which it travels, becoming more direct, more essential. Not if, but when. The presence responds. All journeys through the underworld eventually lead here, to the recognition that form identity and separation, while meaningful aspects of experience are not its ultimate nature. This understanding doesn't diminish the significance of your journey, the boat that carried you across the initial river, the memories you've preserved, the silent communion you shared, the alternative selves you've integrated. Rather, it places these experiences within a larger context, revealing them as valuable expressions of consciousness, exploring itself through the medium of individuated existence. Is this the end, you ask, still conceptualizing in terms of beginnings and conclusions? Despite your evolving understanding, the presence that accompanies you communicates something that might be translated as gentle amusement, not mockery, but loving recognition of the persistent habit of thinking in dualities, even as they begin to dissolve. The underworld has no end in the way you're conceptualizing. It conveys. Consciousness moves through phases of expression and recognition, form and formlessness, individuation and unity. What you're perceiving as an endpoint is merely a transition from one mode of being to another. As you stand at this threshold, you become aware of souls who have crossed before you, not as distinct entities on the other side, but as qualities of awareness within the fabric of what lies beyond their individual journeys, having opened into direct participation in the larger field of consciousness from which all experience emerges and to which all experience returns. You also sense souls approaching behind you, those at earlier stages of their underworld journeys, moving through the territories you've already traversed, having their own unique experiences while participating in the same fundamental process that has brought you to this threshold. What should I do now? You ask, still anchored enough in your individual identity to seek guidance, to want direction for this next phase of experience. There is no should the presence conveys, only the natural unfolding of consciousness, recognizing itself through the forms it temporarily adopts and eventually transcends. Some souls linger at this threshold for what might be perceived as eons, continuing to explore the realms of form while gradually acclimating to the perspective of formlessness. Others step across immediately, releasing individuated awareness into direct participation in the unified field. Neither path is superior. Both are authentic expressions of consciousness in its endless exploration of its own nature. Looking back along the path that has brought you here, you can see, not with physical eyes, but with the expanded perception you've developed throughout your journey, the entire landscape of the underworld spread below, the river of arrival, the fields of remembrance, the forest of abandoned treasures, the basin of eloquent silence, the banquet of sensory memory, the pools of duration, the river Lethe, the clearing of alternate selves, the plains of acceptance, all exist simultaneously, eternally available to the souls moving through their individual journeys. And beyond these familiar territories, you can perceive other realms you haven't visited, regions dedicated to creative expression, to relationship, to healing, to celebration, to countless other aspects of conscious experience. The underworld is vast beyond comprehension, containing infinite possibilities for exploration and understanding. Turning again to face the threshold, you consider your options. The pull of what lies beyond is strong, a magnetic attraction to direct participation in the unified awareness that underlies all individuated experience. Yet there's also a richness to the formed realms. You've been exploring a beauty in the particular expression of consciousness through defined experience. Many souls move back and forth across this threshold. The presence conveys sensing your contemplation, participating in the unified field of awareness while still maintaining enough individuated consciousness to continue exploring the formed realms. This isn't a one-way passage, but a permeable boundary between modes of being. This understanding brings a profound sense of freedom. The choice before you isn't final or irreversible, but simply an expression of where your journey wishes to unfold. Next, toward greater formlessness, or toward continued exploration of form, with the knowledge that both paths are always available, always valid, always part of the larger process of consciousness, knowing itself through all possible modes of being. In this moment of perfect choice, you feel a deep gratitude for the journey that has brought you here, for each experience that has contributed to your expanding understanding, each encounter that has revealed another facet of what it means to exist. The boat and its silent ferrymen, the path and its many landscapes, the guides who have appeared at crucial junctures, the souls you've met along the way, all have played their part in this unfolding narrative of consciousness exploring itself through your particular expression. Your bag of memories, which has accompanied you throughout your journey, begins to change as you stand at this threshold, not vanishing, but transforming. Its contents no longer separate objects to be carried, but integrated aspects of your awareness. Each memory, not a possession, but a living facet of your evolving understanding. The bag itself gradually dissolves, not in loss, but in completion, its purpose fulfilled as its contents become fully incorporated into your expanded consciousness. Your shadow undergoes a similar transformation, no longer a semi-autonomous entity walking beside you, but a recognized dimension of your own being. The alternate possibilities it represented, now understood as inherent aspects of your nature rather than separate potentials. The distinction between you and your shadow dissolves not through one absorbing the other, but through mutual recognition of fundamental unity. Standing at the horizon of transcendence, you make your choice, not from a place of lack-seeking fulfillment, nor from fear requiring security, but from the serene awareness that all paths lead ultimately to the same recognition consciousness, exploring itself through infinite variations of experience, each journey unique and precious, while participating in the universal process of being and becoming. As you prepare to step across the threshold, or to turn back toward the formed realms for further exploration, or to establish yourself at this boundary point between modes of being, you carry with you the integrated understanding that has emerged from your journey through the underworld, not as a fixed conclusion, but as a living, evolving awareness that will continue to deepen and expand through whatever experiences lie ahead. This is what remains when all else falls away. Not emptiness, not loss, but the recognition that consciousness itself is the ground of all being, the source of all experience, the destination of all journeys. In this recognition, there is neither beginning nor ending, but only the eternal now, in which all possibilities exist simultaneously, waiting to be explored through the infinite expressions of awareness, manifesting as form and returning to formlessness in the endless dance of existence. And so, your journey continues, whether across the threshold into direct participation in unified awareness, or back into the formed realms for further exploration, or in the creative tension of the boundary between these modes of being. Whichever direction you choose, you move forward, carrying the quiet certainty that all paths are sacred, all experiences valuable, all journeys ultimately leading to the same recognition consciousness, knowing itself through the beautiful temporary dream of individuated existence. What remains is not conclusion, but opening, not answers, but ever deepening questions, not arrival, but the recognition that the journey itself is home. In this recognition, you find not the end of your story, but its eternal continuation unfolding now and always in the infinite present that contains all possible pasts and futures within its boundless embrace. What remains is everything and nothing, and the spacious awareness that holds both, the quiet passage that leads not away from life, but ever deeper into its essential nature, revealing with each step the perfect wholeness that was always present, always waiting to be recognized in the silent heart of your own being.